Welcome to the Special Operations Leadership Development Team videocast about resilience. I'm joined today by Darcy Luoma, who is the President, CEO, and founder of Darcy Luoma Consulting and Coaching. She has some special expertise about resilience. And as you may know, I'm Gwendolyn Cooley. I am co-chair of the State Enforcement Committee for the Antitrust Section, and I'm a member of the Special Operations Leadership Development Team. So as you can imagine, this time of this year, we are very concerned about resilience, being a little ways into coping with a pandemic and a lot of other things going on in society. And so we thought it would be a great idea to bring Darcy in to give us some insights as to how we continue to cope with this situation. The special videocast is about resilience. And obviously that is something that we've all had to really exercise our resilience muscles for the last few months. And so Darcy, do you want to just talk to us a little bit about resilience and what that means for us all?
Thank you, Gwendolyn. Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I think resilience is such a timely topic no matter what, because there are challenges we experience in our lives, big and small, that can require some grit and some resilience and a growth mindset. And I certainly know firsthand how resilience can come into a play. So I've, as you mentioned, have been working, doing coaching and consulting for, well, I worked for 12 years for Senator Herb Kohl as the director in his Madison office. And then when he retired, I officially launched my full-time business. And at the time, I had talked to my husband. We had 2 young daughters, and we decided that he would continue to be a full-time stay-at-home dad. He had been, since the day they were born, it worked for us. And so he handled everything on the home front. And so I launched my business and said, you know, everything I've learned says that you are going to, the majority of businesses will falter in the first 2 years. So I said, I'm going to go crazy. And I did. And I built a successful business. And what happened then was I was blindsided in the most extreme way when a couple of years into my business, I got a call from my neighbor asking what was happening at my house. And I said, I don't know, I'm not at home. Why? And she said, well, there's 40 or 50 police cars and a SWAT team surrounding your house. And they just took John out barefoot, handcuffed, and he wouldn't look at us. I said, what are you talking, my husband? What are you talking about? And I proceeded to find out that he had been arrested for sexual assault of a minor he had met online. And when he left that day, he never came home. And it started the beginning of my nightmare. And I say nightmare, it wasn't even a nightmare because I had never imagined something so horrible. I'd never had a nightmare so horrible. And all of a sudden, in a moment, I became a full-time single parent. I had to figure out how to navigate the legal system. I had to figure out how to file for divorce, and all while trying to keep my business from shutting down. And so, needless to say, resilience is a critical skill. And at first I didn't have it. At first I shut down completely and just went into shock. But what's interesting, Gwen, is that 5 days before his arrest, I had just finalized my leadership model that I had spending years creating on Thoughtfully Fit. And it had just come alive, and we were excited to put it in the marketplace. So all of a sudden I became ground zero for testing it, because I had to hire an attorney and an attorney for my husband. And my attorney said, don't talk to anybody about anything, no matter what you do. And so I had to keep going back to this Thoughtfully Fit model, where at the core, you pause, think, and then act. And I had to continually, where I just wanted to react, and you know, out of shame, of frustration, out of anger, I had to keep going back to the core. And that's one of the messages that I wanted to deliver today, is when you can keep going back and engaging your core, you can work through any challenge that is put in front of you.
It's such a moving story. And I mean, obviously, as we're friends, I knew that. And just the resilience to get through something like that. I mean, what was coming back to your core? Let's talk about that a little bit. What did that mean to you?
Well, what's interesting, what it meant is I had to get off of autopilot, right? So my default reaction, so for instance, the day after his arrest, I realized all of a sudden I had to go and facilitate a leadership retreat. And I needed to leave in the morning, and the girls had late start Monday, and I didn't know all of a sudden I'm realizing, oh my God, what do I do? John had always been there. So I texted a friend and said, hey, is there any chance that you could help out with the girls? I'm in a bind. And she called me, and this was a mother of another child. And she said, Darcy, first I need to know, did you have anything to do with this? Oh my God. So my autopilot, my default right there, I wanted to shut down. I wanted to scream. I wanted to get angry. I mean, right. And so that whole pause, okay, pause, think. She's scared. Her daughter was at our house a lot under John's supervision. This isn't personal, right? So that core helped me to get off of autopilot and to breathe and to say, oh gosh, I'm taken back by your question. No, absolutely did not have anything to do with this. And so to act more thoughtfully, right? And then her follow-up was, well, let me tell you, if I find out that there are any pictures or videos of my daughter, I'm sending the mafia to your house. And my husband has ties to the mafia. Now, again, in that moment, what I wanted to just scream or cry or shut down. And I just had to pause and just breathe and think, okay, you know what is that going to get me? Nowhere, nothing. And so I said, I understand you're scared, and, right. And to sort of, so I think that's one thing, is that when you have resilience, you can really respond thoughtfully instead of reacting with your gut knee-jerk reaction.
So it sounds like when we talk about resilience, that the thing to do is to prepare yourself in advance for when you're going to need it, because you don't know, as you unfortunately know from lots of experience, you don't know when you're going to need the resilience.
Yeah.
Since this is something that we are all facing, not thankfully for many of us, not quite as dramatically, let's talk about ways that we develop this skill when we don't need to call upon it. We've received a number of videos from ABA members about their ways for coping. And the first one I thought we should show the group is the video from the Honorable Judge Donald. And so we'll just take a look at that.
I am Judge Bernice Bowie Donald, a judge on the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. The pandemic has been such a difficult time in so many ways. The first for me was it caused me to realize that I am now officially elderly. That was the most devastating part of this for me. Other things have been being basically confined to home. While it has enabled me to do many of the court matters, such as reading and writing and reflecting, it also caused me to think about all the things there are to do beyond the confines of my home, and then to experience sadness that I couldn't do any of those things. I suddenly missed the roaring of the engine of a 747 jet, the clanking of silverware in a noisy restaurant. I missed just being outside in various venues, smelling the pollen-laden air. But on the flip side, it has given me lots of time for reflection and times to renew and strengthen bonds with family. I have learned incredible things like Zoom and Remo and WebEx. I don't know how those platforms work, but I know that all of a sudden I can be connected with all of those individuals in two-dimensional forms. One of the lasting things I hope that's come from this is that we will use these new technologies to help reduce the cost of court for participants, that we will make justice more affordable to lots of people, and that some of these things that we have done on an emergency basis will become internalized and institutionalized in our practice. We found that oral argument is just as effective whether we are doing it with people in square boxes or whether they're standing before us in the courtroom without having to have paid for an airplane ticket or an overnight stay at a hotel. Yes, some good things have come out of this, and I hope that we're going to retain the good and never have to go through something like this to learn such basic improvements in the way we live and practice. All the best.
That was a very powerful video. Darcy, did you have any thoughts on it?
Oh my gosh, she just spoke the truth. She named that there are so many challenges whenever there's a crisis that we have to face head on and figure out a new way of being. And what I particularly loved about what Judge Donald said is that she was highlighting that anytime there is a challenge or a struggle or a crisis, that there you can find the silver linings. And she talked about the paradox, that there's all these challenges, and yet if you look for it, there are all these other places where there are benefits and where the good can come. And so she said that, okay, while I'm confined to my home during this time of quarantine and have a lot of sadness, I am more connected to my family, to my friends. I'm having more time for self-reflection and for reading.
And another thing I think I took from that video is that there are things that we can use the disadvantage to our advantage. I know this is something you have done in particular, Darcy, but kind of remaking ourselves and using this as an opportunity to learn something. As Judge Donald said, access to justice. It's amazing how having a video call with a court or a telephone call, while courts have been historically resistant to doing those kinds of appearances not in person, doing them remotely saves clients so much money. Obviously, as a state employee, I'm very concerned about making sure that we save taxpayer dollars as much as possible. So I think that was a really neat way to, reflect on this as almost an opportunity for thinking about the future. We also have some other videos, and this video is from Patrick English with his thoughts on resilience.
Hello, my name is Patrick English. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Membership, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. And on the topic of resilience, I think, the times that we're living in right now, it is really indeed the perfect topic to discuss. We have absolutely 100% turned everything around in terms of our professional lives and our personal lives, but speaking specifically to the professional piece, we have a new office set up, we have new schedules, we have new routines, we have new distractions, we have new acceptable professional attire, and yet, through all of it, I think a lot of us are doing things that we said we would never do. At another time, we would not imagine that we would have been able to cope with certain distractions or do certain things that we're doing now with ease. So I think that's one silver lining. And then at the same time, I think we're also giving each other a little bit more slack when other folks are going through challenges as a result of all this. So, there will come a time when things go back to normal. And I hope that people remember the resilience that they've shown, their ability to adapt to changing circumstances in ways that they didn't expect. And I hope they remember the compassion that they showed for other people who might be struggling. Thanks.
So I thought that was a fantastic video. I think he really talked about an important thing. For one, the new standards. I think we are cutting each other a lot more slack, having now all shared this experience. Darcy, your experience was so individual and so, as you've mentioned, so isolating. Whereas in some ways, though we are isolated, this experience really has created a sense of community across the country, where we are giving each other slack. You know, I'm videotaping this outside, which I mean, as a person who has spent 15 years sitting in an office every day, it's pretty great. Although one thing I don't agree with him on is the dress standards, as we can see. Darcy, did you have thoughts on this?
Oh, I appreciated so much that Patrick talked about our human capacity to be able to adapt, and that one of the benefits that's coming from this is an increased ability to access compassion. And so when we talk about engaging your core, at your core are two things: choices and control. So if you can always go back to what choices do I have, especially when it might feel like there are no choices, or the only choices are between, you know, two bad things. You can look at and explore what are the choices here, and then what do I control, and focus just on that. Even when it feels like, oh, I don't control anything, and you can feel like you're the victim of your circumstances, there's a lot you still do control. And I thought he was highlighting, like, maybe some good that will come for this is that people will choose to keep that compassion moving forward in our relationships.
That's such an interesting perspective about, you know, taking advantage of those few things you control. I have found even some simple things, getting up, and I found this when I went through my divorce, is getting up and making your bed every day, right? Getting up and going for a walk and going for a run. And, you know, for me, it's putting work clothes on and having a separate space in the house and actually physically going to an office and doing that despite chaos at home. That's really proved true. Talk to us about some of the other choices and control things that you've seen.
Well, it's interesting because earlier you said, gosh, so it really takes practice and training. And I think the example you're giving is beautiful because you can start small. You can start with the small choices. If the big ones feel too overwhelming, I'm just going to make my bed every day, and I'm going to create a home and an environment where I feel like, is grounded. I've got a blog that I wrote saying, don't start with your mother-in-law, right? when you are looking to really build your core, focus on your choices and your control. You maybe are at the store and somebody cuts you off, and instead of reacting in anger or flipping them off or saying something, in that moment, just pause and think, okay, what will that get me? What could I do right now that will access compassion and empathy, and then acting, right? So, and the more you practice, the easier it gets. Just like if you're going to run a 5K, you start by running a minute, and that's hard, and you walk home, and then you run 2 minutes, and eventually that 5K feels easy. And it's not because it's easy, it's because you have greater capacity and strength. It's the same way with resilience. When you practice building your core, you can handle yourself thoughtfully in any situation instead of worrying about overreacting.
So my partner is an ER physician, and he says there's a saying in the ER, which is, don't just do something, stand there. Yes. Take the time to stop and think before reacting. Because especially in a situation like that where there's so much urgency all the time. So speaking of resilience, we just lost the internet connection and had to restart in a different location. So as I was saying, my partner has a saying that he works in the ER, and there's so much urgency there, but they have a saying, don't just do something, stand there. And so whether it's something complicated, where you really need to figure out what thing happens first, right? Where you need to figure out how to get the kids to school and hire a lawyer and do all of those things, or something as basic as, okay, we need to triage not having an internet connection because I'm on an important business phone call. What do I do next? Right? Okay, stop, think, okay, I'll just go in another room. So we have so many.
A beautiful example of a pivot in that moment, right? And to just be able to think, okay, what do I control in this moment? What choices do I have? I could be angry, I could be pissy, I could let the rest of the interview go sour, or I can choose to pick up, to move, to take a moment to reapply lipstick, right, and keep going. And so that comment about don't just do something, stand there. One of the things, so I tend to be like really I want to always engage. And so the pause for me is the hardest. And so if there's anybody who's watching that also has a hard time with the pause and you just want to act and especially if it's urgent. I mean, anywhere else is there more urgency than in an ER? And yet to recognize the value of the pause. And so there's something that I do called the pause pinch, where I just right here take and pinch myself. And I can even do it, behind my back or with my hands under the table to remind myself. And that pinch gives me just a moment to kick off of autopilot to then think, okay, what choices do I have? What do I control right now? And then to proceed by acting thoughtfully. So in case that's helpful, it's something I use all the time because my default is to just act or react or overreact.
So that's interesting. I do something very similar in a deposition. When you and I, Darcy, both worked in Senator Cole's office, one of our good friends said, remember that they can't quote a pause. And so when I am in a deposition and I can't think of my next question, I know that the court reporter is the one who keeps the official transcript. So if I just stop and think, I will come up with my next question. I just don't say anything.
I think practice, doesn't it? I mean, I know for me, it has taken a lot of training to be able to hit the pause button.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So there are a number of ways to coping, and I have just come from one of them outside. We have a video from Vic Doman that we will show next.
Hey, Antitrust Section members, this is Vic Doman at Norton Rose Fulbright. And what do I do to get out and handle all this COVID-19 stuff and everything else going on? You can see it. Get outside. It's the best way to clear your mind, clear your head, and think about antitrust issues, which is, all that's the most important in the world. Just kidding. I hope everyone's doing well. Enjoy yourselves. This is a rare opportunity to spend time with family, friends, and your pets. So take advantage of it. Hope to see you all soon. Take care.
Darcy, what did you think about Vic's video?
Oh, just the whole message, like get outside. Nature provides a natural pause for us because there aren't all the incoming billboards and emails and dings, right, that's coming at us when we are in our car or when we're meeting or we're in a building. And so I think that is such a simple, easy way to access the pause and to build your resilience.
I absolutely agree. When I was going through some rough times myself, I thought that misery couldn't run more than 5 miles. So I would go out for a run of 5.01 miles and I would find that misery was left in the dust. So we've got some other ways of enjoying the outside. Next, we'll see a video from Casey Halliday.
Knock arrow. Okay, take aim. Bravo!
Darcy, did you have thoughts on that one?
What a great video, right? I mean, just kids shooting an arrow and highlighting, is there an opportunity to deepen your connections and to rely on those things where there's safety, there was so much in that video that wasn't said that was just underlying that I thought was really powerful. And I know, for me, as I had to work through the phases of grief and anger and betrayal, that one of the things that helped me to get through that is knowing that I want to be there for my daughters and that I couldn't just, that I was choosing to not let things fall apart. And so they're highlighting connecting with your kids, your family, others who can support you and bring some joy and lightness is a great strategy.
And one of the things we've talked about earlier is, right, like looking at the opportunities from the current situation. A lot of us are spending a lot more time with our families than we probably ever expected to, and seeing the opportunities that come from that, whether that's archery or something else. And we have a video from Michaela Sparrow that talks about that.
Hello from our morning commute. Can you say hi? One of the silver linings of quarantine.
Thanks, Michaela. I'll have to say that I am doing the same thing with the morning walk around the block, although without a baby. But we take the dog for a walk every morning, and that is such a great way to start out the day, even when it's raining. Because when it's raining, I just pretend like it's a worse commute.
And a day walking the dog in the rain is better any day than being in rush hour traffic on a real commute. That's wonderful. Yeah, there is an opportunity to, I think, be able to, in that, when we talk about, accessing your choices and control, how do you do that? You pause in the moment and think. That's a place where I think you can get really creative. And when you're in that phase of trying to explore your choices, asking some questions. What can I do in this time where things are so challenging? I think that's one of the things that Judge Donald talked about. Like, there's a lot we can't do. What can I do? What choices do I have? What do I need? How can I get that need met? What are the obstacles to that? And the solutions can be really simple if you give yourself the time to pause and to then think about it and come up with some creative choices.
Do you have any final thoughts for us, Darcy, before we conclude?
I want to say I love your creativity. When you first reached out to say, can we do something resilience, to open it up and ask people to share their videos of their personal experiences was so fun. I do a lot of different webinars, and especially, as we are working through the different phases of COVID, and I've never had somebody be as creative as you were. And so it's an honor to be here. I also did put together, if anybody wants to go deeper, I've talked a lot about Thoughtfully Fit and how you can work your way through crises and be thoughtful and focus on your choices and control. And so I've got a 3-part video series that I did that talks about specifically more details on how I worked through that worst moment in my life, and the story just kept building for weeks, for months, to the point where I had to ship my daughters off to Minnesota, where it was like, it wasn't just a quick blip on the radar and then things went back. And so if anybody wants to access those, you can just go to thoughtfullyfit.com and sign up, and those will come to you by video. Excuse me, those videos will come to you by email.
Darcy, thank you so much for sharing your story and your advice. I think we all need it in this time where we need to dig deep and get as much resilience as we can. So thank you so much. You can check out darcyluoma.com for those videos. And thank you to members of the ABA for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day.